Linux Mint 23 just changed everything, and if you think that sounds dramatic, wait until you see what's happening under the hood. For years, Linux Mint has been known as the safe choice, the stable choice, the comfort zone distribution for users who wanted something that just works. It was the distro people recommended to friends, to family, to Windows switchers who were nervous about the terminal and allergic to complexity. But with Linux Mint 23, something fundamental has shifted. This is not just another incremental update with a newer kernel and a few polished themes. This is the moment where Mint begins to seriously embrace the future of Linux graphics and display technology, Wayland. And that changes everything about performance, gaming, security, and where this operating system is headed next. To understand why this matters, you need to understand the history. For decades, Linux desktops relied on X11, often just called Xorg. X11 was powerful, flexible, and incredibly mature. It allowed remote display forwarding, deep customization, and it powered virtually every Linux desktop you've ever seen. But it was also old, architecturally old. Designed in a time when security models were different, GPUs were simpler, and compositing wasn't a default expectation. Over time, X11 became layered with patches and workarounds. Modern desktop environments had to bolt compositors on top. Screen tearing, input latency, scaling inconsistencies, and security limitations became part of the baggage. Wayland was designed as the successor, a simpler, more modern protocol that rethinks how applications talk to the display server. Instead of relying on decades-old assumptions, Wayland aims to reduce latency, improve security isolation between apps, and provide smoother rendering by integrating compositing directly into the display system. Other major distributions have already taken the leap. GNOME on Fedora has been Wayland first for years. Ubuntu has embraced it as the default in recent releases. Tetaplasma has rapidly matured its Wayland session. But Linux Mint held back, carefully, deliberately, waiting for stability and maturity. Mint's philosophy has always been to adopt technology when it is ready, not when it is trendy. With Linux Mint 23, that patience pays off. Wayland is no longer an experimental checkbox hidden behind warnings. It's a serious, supported option that signals Mint's long-term direction. And the moment you log in, the difference is subtle but powerful. Animations feel smoother, input feels tighter. On supported hardware, especially with modern GPUs, the desktop feels more directly connected to your mouse and keyboard. That's not just placebo. Wayland reduces certain layers of indirection present in X11, allowing frames to be presented more efficiently. Performance is one of the biggest questions people have. Does Wayland make Mint faster? The answer is nuanced. Raw CPU benchmarks may not show dramatic differences. Launching applications, compiling code, running background services, these aren't magically accelerated by Wayland. But graphical performance, especially in composited environments, can feel smoother. Frame pacing improves. Screen tearing is effectively eliminated without needing hacks like force composition pipeline. Fractional scaling behaves more consistently across monitors. On high refresh rate displays, 144 Hz and beyond, the desktop feels like it finally matches the hardware. For laptop users, especially those with hybrid graphics, Wayland opens new doors. Power efficiency can improve because compositors have better awareness of rendering paths. Modern drivers, particularly open-source AMD drivers and newer Intel graphics stacks, integrate beautifully with Wayland. That means less glitching when waking from suspend, more reliable multi-monitor behavior, and fewer weird artifacts when docking and undocking. If you've ever connected an external monitor and watched your desktop rearrange itself like a confused puzzle, you know how important this is. Gaming is where things get really interesting. Linux gaming has exploded in recent years thanks to Proton, Steam Play, and Valve's massive investment in Linux for the Steam Deck, but historically many gamers were cautious about Wayland. Early Wayland sessions had issues with full-screen games, input capture, and screen recording. Some anti-cheat systems didn't behave well. Tools like OBS relied heavily on X11-specific capture methods. That created a perception that Wayland was not ready for serious gaming. Linux Mint 23 changes that conversation. With updated compositors and improved protocol extensions, full-screen gaming under Wayland is far more stable. Frame presentation is more consistent. On AMD GPUs in particular, Wayland can reduce stutter in some Vulkan titles because of how buffers are handled. Variable refresh rate support is improving, and on compatible hardware, Wayland sessions can finally take advantage of modern monitor features more cleanly than X11 ever could. Input latency, a critical factor for competitive gaming, can be lower due to the streamlined rendering pipeline. Nvidia users have historically faced more complexity. Proprietary drivers were slower to adopt Wayland-friendly implementations. But recent driver updates have significantly improved compatibility. Linux Mint 23 integrates newer driver stacks that better support GBM and modern buffer management, reducing the old reliance on EGL streams. The result is that Nvidia gaming on Wayland is no longer the experimental minefield it once was. It's not perfect, but it's usable, stable, and improving rapidly. Streaming and content creation also see benefits. Wayland's security model isolates applications more strictly. Under X11, any application could theoretically snoop on input events from other applications. Wayland prevents that by design. Screen recording requires explicit portal permissions. That's more secure, but it also required new tooling. Flatpak applications, for example, use XDG Desktop Portal to request screen capture access. In Linux Mint 23, these integrations are smoother. OBS can capture your screen through Pipewire. Browser-based screen sharing works more reliably. Video calls no longer feel like a compatibility gamble. One of the most transformative aspects of Wayland in Mint 23 is fractional scaling. If you've used a 4K monitor at 125% or 150% scaling under X11, you've probably encountered blur. X11 scaling often relied on scaling the entire frame buffer, leading to less than crisp text. Wayland allows per-monitor scaling and more precise rendering. On mixed DPI setups, say, a 4K laptop screen paired with a 108OP external monitor, Wayland handles scaling in a way that feels almost seamless. Windows open at appropriate sizes. Fonts remain sharp. UI elements don't look like they've been dragged through a low-resolution filter. There's also the question of legacy applications. X11 has been around for so long that countless apps depend on its behavior. Wayland handles this through X-Wayland, a compatibility layer that allows X11 applications to run within a Wayland session. In Linux Mint 23, X-Wayland is mature enough that many users won't even notice when an app is using it. The transition is gradual, not abrupt. Native Wayland applications benefit fully from the new protocol, while older apps continue functioning as expected. Security is another quiet revolution. Under X11, the security model was notoriously permissive. Applications could inspect global input, inject events, and potentially spy on each other. Wayland's design restricts that. Applications cannot simply record your keystrokes unless explicitly granted permission. This matters not just for privacy-conscious users, but for enterprise environments and anyone concerned about malicious software. Linux Mint has always been seen as user-friendly, but Mint 23 quietly strengthens its security posture simply by embracing Wayland more deeply. The future implications are even bigger. By aligning more closely with Wayland, Linux Mint positions itself for upcoming technologies. HDR support on Linux is in its early stages, but much of the work is happening in Wayland compositors. Advanced color management, better touchpad gestures, smoother touchscreen support. These are all areas where Wayland's architecture provides a cleaner foundation. As hardware evolves, the display server must evolve with it. X11 simply wasn't designed for HDR gaming monitors, multi-touch gestures, and per-window scaling on ultrawide displays. Wayland also influences how desktop environments evolve. Cinnamon, Mint's flagship desktop, has traditionally been tightly integrated with X11. Bringing Cinnamon into the Wayland era requires deep work. Linux Mint 23 reflects significant engineering effort to adapt Cinnamon's window management and compositing logic to Wayland's model. That's not a superficial tweak. That's foundational work that ensures Cinnamon remains relevant for the next decade. Instead of being trapped by legacy assumptions, it can grow alongside modern Linux infrastructure. For users upgrading from older Mint versions, the transition is surprisingly gentle. You can still choose X11 if you need it. That safety net is important. If you rely on specialized tools or workflows that behave better under X11, Mint doesn't force you to abandon them overnight. But the presence of a polished Wayland session sends a clear signal. This is the direction forward. Over time, as compatibility improves further, Wayland will likely become the default. And by the time that happens, most users will already be comfortable with it. Community reaction has been a mix of excitement and cautious optimism. Longtime Mint users appreciate the stability-first approach. They don't want flashy changes that break workflows. Linux Mint 23 demonstrates that you can adopt cutting-edge technology without sacrificing reliability. Early testers report fewer graphical glitches, smoother animations, and better multi-monitor handling. Gamers report stable frame rates and fewer tearing issues. Content creators appreciate improved screen capture workflows. There are still challenges. Some niche utilities that depend on low-level X11 features may need updates. Certain window management tricks behave differently under Wayland. But these are transitional growing pains, not fundamental flaws. The Linux ecosystem as a whole is converging on Wayland. By embracing it now in a mature, controlled way, Mint ensures it won't be left behind. From a philosophical standpoint, Linux Mint 23 represents something deeper than a display protocol change. It shows that even the most stability-focused distribution can evolve. It demonstrates that open-source projects can balance caution with innovation. Wayland is not a shiny experiment anymore. It's the foundation of modern Linux desktops. And Mint's adoption of it signals confidence in the direction the ecosystem is heading. When you step back and look at the broader picture, Linux Mint 23 isn't just about smoother animations or better scaling. It's about preparing users for the next generation of Linux computing. It's about making gaming on Linux more seamless. It's about ensuring privacy by design. It's about supporting new hardware without hacks. It's about aligning with upstream developments so Mint can continue delivering a polished, cohesive experience. If you're a gamer, you'll notice the consistency. If you're a developer, you'll appreciate the cleaner architecture. If you're a casual user, you'll feel the smoothness without necessarily knowing why. That's the beauty of this transition. The most important changes are often invisible. They manifest as fewer glitches, fewer compromises, fewer moments where you think this feels outdated. Linux Mint 23 just changed everything because it marks the beginning of a new era for one of the most beloved Linux distributions. Wayland isn't a side experiment anymore. It's part of Mint's core story. And as hardware accelerates, as displays become more advanced, as gaming continues to grow, this foundation will matter more and more. The future of Linux desktops is being written right now. With Mint 23 embracing Wayland in a serious way, that future looks smoother, faster, more secure, and more capable than ever before. And if this is just the beginning, the next few releases could push Linux Mint even further ahead, turning it from the safe recommendation into the forward-looking powerhouse that defines the modern Linux experience.